Good evening, good afternoon, rather, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this Mississippi Legislative Recap. This is a part two. We've got two great guests today, two senators. Last part one, we had two representatives, and today we've got two senators. So we'll give a couple seconds to let more folks come on in, and we'll get started on this Mississippi Legislative Recap, which is hosted by One Voice and Mississippi NAACP. Again, thank y'all all for joining us. We'll get started here in a couple seconds. Let more folks trickle on in on this Friday afternoon. All right, well, I'm Marcus Williams, and I'm the political action co-chair for the Mississippi State Conference, and I have the pleasure of being the moderator with our two esteemed guests here today. We've got two senators from our Mississippi legislature who are up there fighting for us, who just wrapped up a session that was full of a lot of activity. Our first guest is Senator Tammy Witherspoon. Miss Senator Witherspoon is a native of Macomb, Mississippi, and she's a 1986 graduate of Macomb High School and a 1991 graduate of the I Love Jackson State University. And she holds her bachelor's degree in elementary education, and she's got a master's degree from Alcorn. And she's the owner of Sankofa Preschool Academy, where you see the beautiful background. And she was the first African American woman elected to the city board of Macomb, and she ran unopposed for second term. That was in 2010, and then in 2015 she was elected to our state senate to District 38. Thank you for joining us, Senator Witherspoon.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome. And next we have Senator Derek T. Simmons. Senator Simmons is a Greenville native and a graduate of the I Love Jackson State University as well, Howard University College of Business, and Howard Law School, a fellow lawyer. And he has degrees in accounting, finance, and law respectively. So this is a smart brother. He's a trial lawyer. He's affiliated with the American Bar Association, the National Bar Association, Mississippi Bar, the MAG Bar, the DC Bar, and the Greenville Rotary Club. He's a Mason and a lifelong member of the MAG Bar and a lifelong member of NAACP, which is important, and a life member of Kappa Alpha Psi. And he holds the position of the Mississippi State Senate Minority Leader. He is married to Kawanda Flowers, has two children, and is of the Baptist faith. So thank you for joining us, Senator Simmons.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank y'all. As you know, this legislative session was historic for several reasons. We were dealing with a pandemic. We brought the flag down, but there was a lot of business y'all still conducted while y'all were up there. And we want to get into some of those things. In part one, we talked about a lot. Part two, we're going to dig in some more on some things. One of the things I know people are really interested in talking about is criminal justice. As you know, Governor Reeves recently vetoed a bill that was set to help in that regard, Senate Bill 2123 regarding parole eligibility. And Senator Simmons, if you would, could you please tell the folks about that and talk to it?
Thank you, Marcus. Again, thank you for the NAACP and One Voice for hosting these town halls, these series, because it's important that we actually stay in front of the people. Well, as you know, the state faces a prison crisis, and that prison crisis deals with overcrowding of our jails and our correction facilities. As you all know, at the end of last year and at the beginning of this year, we had a lot of violence in our correction system, and we are dealing with several lawsuits, including one from the Department of Justice, largely because of Mississippi's harsh sentencing laws, as well as our lack of reentry programs for those returning neighbors to our community. In a very bipartisan way, we passed two critical pieces of legislation. House Bill 658 that was aimed at helping our returning neighbors to re-enter society and in the workforce by expanding expungement laws to allow them to support and feed their families. That bill was vetoed by the governor. And the big comprehensive bill, to your question, Marcus, was Senate Bill 2123. That bill was really, really good as well. and it was passed in a bipartisan way overwhelmingly by the legislature. It would have reduced the prison population safely through parole eligibility. We could have saved tens of millions of dollars during this economic crisis and demonstrated to the Department of Justice that Mississippi is committed to addressing its incarceration crisis. As you all know, Mississippi has the second highest incarceration rate in the world. And so Senate Bill 2123 would have gotten us on the right track to addressing that. It also would have, in addition to saving millions of dollars, we would have implemented incentives through rehabilitative programs. You know, what we want to do for those offenders that are in the system, we want to encourage good behavior and discourage bad behavior. And so Senate Bill 2123 would have given them hope of release, and also those rehabilitative programs would have helped them behave the way that they needed to behave while they were in the system. And also, it ensured that no person convicted of a violent offense be released on parole unless the parole board agreed through a very, very careful review process. And what's important, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, Marcus, about the people that would have been released. Violent habitual offenders would not have been eligible for release or parole eligibility. Offenders sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, and also those offenders who were convicted of capital murder. They all were not eligible for parole consideration in Senate Bill 2123, but everyone else would have gone through a very thorough review process and only would have been released if the parole board said so.
Right, which is obviously would have been important and went a long way for us dealing with this criminal justice crisis that we are facing in Mississippi and dealing with the prison crisis. So it's unfortunate to see that the governor vetoed it. Obviously, given the pandemic, the legislature won't be as meeting to come back to try to override the veto as soon as possible. So let's hope that with more work, you guys can be able to bring it back forth and maybe be able to get the progress that we need. Senator Witherspoon, I wanted to ask you about some legislation that you had this session. I believe you've actually filed it before as well in regards to a ban the box bill. Could you talk to us about the status of this bill, its significance?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. I had to mute, as you mentioned earlier. I'm at my preschool, so I had to unmute. But thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be here with One Voice and the Mississippi NAACP and my chairman, my awesome leadership that we have in the Senate. It's an honor to be on this panel with him as well. You mentioned some legislation that I authored this session. Okay.
Right.
One of
the ban the box.
Yes, sir. One of the the bill. Can you all see me?
Mm-hmm. You're good. We can see you and hear you.
Okay, great. Because I did something to my computer. The ban the box. You mentioned Senate Bill 2112. That is a piece of legislation that I've been introducing now ever since I've been in Senate. So this actually was the 5th year that I introduced that piece of legislation, and very excited about it. It did get traction thanks to my colleagues and thanks to the leadership. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, he thought it was a good piece of legislation. So for the first time in 4 years, that he wanted to see it come out of the committees. And it did. It passed the House, it's passed the Senate first, came out of the committees and both committees that it was referred to, and then it passed the Senate. But that bill, what it does, Senator Simmons mentioned a lot of work that we did for, prison reform and our correctional facility. We know what we're dealing with. And those bills that he talked about. But also it's important for individuals coming out of incarceration to have jobs And that ban the box simply said that all state, city, county government, any government entities would ban that box, on their initial application. And we know that when with that box, that box is very prejudiced. A lot of employees see that box, and if that box is checked, of course the applications go to file 13, as we call it. It does not get a second look. It does not look at their education or even background history or even job history. So we started with the state and local entities first. We thought that was important, that we start there, that we could get that off those applications, that would be a start, but it did not in no way stop the school districts and nursing home for having a background, criminal history background check. Some jobs require that as a part of the application process, that especially if you're working with our vulnerable adults and our children. So it did not stop that in no way. It just really just gave individuals, coming out of prison, the second chance, of getting a job so they can take care of their family, so they can pay child support. But it did pass the House. I was very excited about that. But of course, they did a lot of strikeout. They did a lot of strikeout by the time it made it back over to the House. So we sent it to conference. And I remember my chairman, Senator Simmons, telling me this is furthest that bill ever got. So we was real excited about it. And of course, I tried to ease some language back in there for conference, but it did fly. But I did talk with the chairman, the leadership over on the House, and they both agreed that we're going to get something together, and we'll work again on it next year. So I'm very excited about that.
And the box is so important because obviously, like you said, it asks you if you were a convicted felon, and that's just prejudicial to folks when they're trying to get a job. I mean, it just is. And some folks may have made one mistake or one bad decision in their life, and it shouldn't, prohibit them from being a productive member of society once they've paid their debt to society. And so we appreciate your work on that and fighting for that. And we're hoping that, as criminal justice becomes a big issue around the country after, of course, the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and the world is really paying attention right now, that hopefully we can get more passed and more bills can come to the forefront. Moving to a sort of another important issue that I know you've been fighting for, Senator, since you got there, Senator Witherspoon, is pay equity. Women deserve equal pay for equal work, and that's one of the things that I know you have been championing. And so I want to hear a little bit about sort of what your efforts have been this session in that regard, and kind of what bills were able to move.
Okay, yes, I've been introducing a pay equity bill. Of course, this year, we was real excited. We were celebrating the women's suffrage right year. We was really hoping that this piece of legislation would move. Of course, there was other equal pay or for equal work, or, other bills that were introduced. But unfortunately, that didn't make it out of committee. But I'm going back again with that. We know that women, get paid much less than men, with the same degree, the same amount of experience. Women get paid average of 25 cents or more less than a man working with the same job and the same work experience and the same degrees. So that's very important. That's a very important issue, around the nation, around the world. There have been several pay equity, equal pay bills introduced. And again, I will be going back. I'll be going back again next session, introducing the bill as well, introducing the bill again.
And Senator Simmons, did you have anything you want to add on that?
No, it's just that anytime we deal with that ban the box legislation, as well as pay equity, the Senate Democrats, we just follow Senator Witherspoon's lead. She's very passionate, and she is she's an advocate for those issues. And even though we are really grateful about how much movement those bills received this legislative session, we will not give up. We will continue to fight for those issues, because those are really, really good policies for the state of Mississippi.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we appreciate y'all being there fighting. That's what we need. We need folks up there fighting. Um, Another thing I know that all of this ties into the money, the revenue. Where does the money go? The budget, how it affects our economy. Obviously, due to COVID-19, folks were expecting the economy to be really bad. Obviously, there was some recent news by the state economist that came out about sort of the revenue that was collected despite what occurred during COVID-19. So if you guys would, please tell us a little bit about sort of the budget and some of the COVID-19 relief efforts that the legislature undertook, as well as some of the CARES money and what you guys are going to be able to do with that. So, Senator Simmons, you want to
I'll
in on that?
I'll jump right in. Thanks, Marcus. As far as the CARES federal dollars that we received as a state, we received $1.25 billion. And the very first thing we did, we took about 25% of that money and set up a small business program to help our small businesses, which are the heartbeats of our communities. And so we did a $300 million appropriation to that. And the remaining $900 million, we basically appropriated accordingly. We did about broadband access, about $75 million, healthcare, we did about $130 million for MEMA to continue to assist our during the emergency efforts regarding the pandemic. We appropriated 40 million for cities and counties, 70 million for the Department of Corrections. We did about 20 million for tourism, 15 million, K-12 distance learning, approximately 200 million for our universities, 50 million, community and junior colleges, 50 million, workforce development, about 55 million, for our courts to get equipped and be able to provide virtual visitation, as well as try to make the courts more suitable to operate during this pandemic. We allocated about 2.5 million, and the remaining money was about $180 million, Marcus, for the Unemployment Trust Fund, which will continue to help those Mississippians who are struggling during this time and who are not working, so to receive those unemployment benefits. So that totaled about 1.25 billion. We are very, very excited about what the legislature did in appropriating these funds. We did that also in a bipartisan way, and we hope that Congress could pass another relief package, and we as a legislature can get back to making a decision to continue to help Mississippians during these unprecedented times.
Absolutely. That's a lot of money that is going to go to the communities, and hopefully it gets spent in the right way and goes to the people that really need it. Senator Witherspoon, did you have something to add on that?
No, not at all. He did all.
Well, Marcus, if you want me, I can just very, very briefly talk about the budget because that was the federal COVID funds.
Right. Yeah. No. Go ahead. Let us know about the budget.
Okay. Well. So as far as the budget,
either.
Okay. All right. So the budget, of course, we always look at the funds that we received, the collections the previous year, and we like to compare collections every month in the new fiscal year to see how well we were doing. And so, of course, revenues were down around March and April, as you can imagine, because we actually shut down. Then we started seeing revenues pop back up. And so our largest source of revenue is the 7% sales tax. And so we were up about $18 million regarding sales tax, or about 1% from last year. Our second largest source of revenue is the personal income tax, and we were down about $80 million in personal income tax, or about 4%. But as you recall, the federal government first extended the federal tax deadline from April the 15th to July 15th. Mississippi, we took a while before we actually fell in line, but we did. The Department of Revenue did move it to July the 15th, which was this past Wednesday. So that amount, $80 million short in personal income tax, may be a little misleading because A lot of people have filed since Wednesday and will be filing, so that number may change. Our 7% use tax, which is the tax that we impose on internet sales, it was up about 4% or about $13 million. And then the tax on liquor was up about $7 million or 9%. And so out of general fund revenue collections, we generated about roughly 5.8 billion in revenue collections, and we appropriated about $5.7 billion. And so our budget for the 2021 fiscal year is about $6.2 billion in total state support. And I'll just basically say, and I know you want to know about those agencies, Marcus, that were cut. Really, all of our agencies receive on average a 5 to 6% cut.
Wow.
Because we did generate probably about $150 million less in collections than we did last year. So our K-12 budget was cut about 2.3%. To the tune of $61 million. So we appropriated $2.5 billion out of that $6.2 billion. Community colleges, we appropriated $236 million, and it was cut by 6%, which is about $15 million. Our universities, we appropriated $676 million. That cut was about 6%, which represented 24 million. Corrections, we appropriated 310 million. It was cut by $7 million, which is 2.3%. Mental health, thank God we only cut it 1%. We appropriated 230 million, which represented about 2 million of a cut. And then the last two I'll mention will be the Department of Public Safety was cut 10%, which would represent about $10.6 million. So the appropriation was 91 million from over last year. And Child Protective Services was cut 11%, and we appropriated 111 million, cutting it by $14 million. So that's the budget.
So we had across the board cuts averaging, it looks like, between 5 to 10% for most agencies, huh?
Yep.
From your perspective, Senator Witherspoon, as a small business owner during this time with the COVID-19, as well as having in the child care facility, how has it been able to affect your ability to operate your business and be a legislator in this time?
Well, wow, that's a good question. The good thing is when I'm away in the legislature, I have good quality staff that's here, of course, running the daycare. But with this COVID, it was a big wake up call for me. And yes, I had to come back. We did get out in time so I can come back, and I did not close because I had essential moms and essential dads. I had nurses, I had police officers, that needed childcare services. But it was challenging, it was challenging, and a lot of times trying to keep children safe, and the staff that stayed and remained working, trying to keep them safe. There were a lot of children, that stopped coming, which was good, I was okay with that, because safety, is first. And but the ones that did come, and of course the PPPs was hard to come about. I had to find PPPs where I can, and go where they were and order a lot online. But during this time, it's been very challenging, and now I remain open, but it still remains challenging in this time. It's been challenging, but I'm persevering through it. My staff is well. The center's well. The children are well. The parents are well. So we're just trying to make through it as any other business would do in this pandemic.
Right. Absolutely, and that's the most we can ask for really during this time, because as you said, it's unprecedented. Nobody could have been completely
Absolutely.
prepared for something like this, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of debate is going on about what we're going to do with education and going forward and how and mask mandates, and so this unprecedented time is really causing for leadership to stand up, and we appreciate y'all for being able to do that for us. And kind of want to let everybody know that's on this live. If you got any questions on Facebook, you can certainly comment and we'll get to your question as soon as we can. Um, I want to ask both of you just sort of a general question about this legislative session. Um, in your opinion, and what you saw based on your experience in this one, where was the progress made? Where did we fall short? What do you think we could have done but didn't do? Obviously, the big thing we did was take that flag down, right? But what was some progress made and some things that you think we could have done? Either one of y'all can go first.
Ladies first.
Ladies first. This was I say a good surprise session. For the most part of it, it was better. It had been a better session than the previous 4 years, and we did get a lot of things done, especially taking down of the flag. But with the pandemic, it was a lot of things that was halted too because of this pandemic. But to be honest, I think we did get off to a great start. We really did. Bills that normally wouldn't even make it out of the committee. Wouldn't even get looked at in a committee. Made it out of the committee. We had dialogue with leadership. Even across party lines, we had dialogue. Look, it's time to work on good piece of legislation, and not Democrat, not Republican. It's just time to work on good legislation. And some of that legislation, Senator Simmons talked about the Senate bills, the correction bills, that he co-authored. Those bills, the senators really worked on those bills, and to get it off and to get it off out of committee and out of the Senate and onto the House and out of the House, that was pretty good. That was pretty big. This pandemic, it was different for all of us, and it put a lot of us thinking, in ways that we probably wouldn't have thought if it hadn't happened. But the good thing is there's the same leadership is there, coming up, and I'm sure senators going to be introducing the same piece of legislation, and even new legislation. We hope to gain new legislation. So we just really hoping to keep the dialogue going, keep it open, and looking for another progressive session for 2021.
Absolutely. Senator Simmons?
I would echo what Senator Witherspoon said, Marcus. I think that this session, certainly it starts off with just new leadership. It starts off with the bipartisanship that we are seeing in the Mississippi legislature that we have not seen in a long time. A lot of those bills that she mentioned, whether they were criminal justice reform bills or those bills about reentry and helping people become productive citizens that she talked about. Those bills not only came out of committee, they passed the Senate and they passed the House. And for the most part, they died like the last week of the legislative session. We haven't seen this type movement on legislation that have been very good for Mississippi, sponsored by Democrats in a long time. And so I would just start off by saying just the bipartisanship that we are seeing at the Mississippi legislature should be applauded and commended with the leaders Philip Gunn and Lieutenant Governor Holzman. Now, of course, like you said, I think the session will go down in history as the session to be remembered of removing the Confederate flag, House Bill 1796. After the murder of George Floyd, we saw those global protests. We also saw national protests. And in fact, we saw the largest protests in the state of Mississippi since the Civil Rights era. And so I just want to say I'm very, very thankful for leaders like Senator Witherspoon, who's very progressive. Also, other progressive leaders, Democrats and Republicans, a chorus of faith-based leaders, Black and white, sports association and groups and leagues, and also the business community, all came together and said that the time is now. And so that's the reason why we were able to remove that racist, divisive symbol and retire it respectfully, and move Mississippi in the direction that she deserves to go, that would exhibit love and not hate, that would represent all Mississippians and not some, to have a flag that basically represents the brightness of Mississippi and not the dark past that we all hear about from those people who have never been here, always talking about Mississippi. So I think we are ready to heal, and we are tired of being wounded by the flag and all of the other racial inequalities that exist in Mississippi. But it's just the start. It's just the start. And so the legislation that we have talked about during this Facebook Live, we need to continue to push that legislation, because that's the only way we would address the underlying conditions of African Americans and communities of color in Mississippi, those racial inequalities that exist. And so some of the other legislation that I think that wouldn't have been killed or wouldn't have died without the help of Senate Democrats and working well with House Democrats as well as the Legislative Black Caucus. But Senate Bill 2459, which was a gang bill, that bill died. It was a bill that would have added a felony enhancement for those suspected of gang involvement. It basically would have criminalized the First Amendment, the right to associate. Senate Bill 2342 also died. It was a bill containing anti-transgender high school athletic language, very discriminatory language. We were able to work across the aisle and actually kill that bill. That's a success. Senate Bill 2670, which was a measure that would have required certain voters to confirm their citizenship when registering to vote, which is just another suppressive measure that we've seen time and time again introduced in the legislature. And a lot of times, a lot of these bills get a lot of movement. We were able to work with leadership and get this bill defeated in the Senate. House Bill 888, it was a bill that would have criminalized the use and the accounting of student clubs or high school booster clubs. Can you imagine that? Where our aggressive state auditor will basically be investigating and indicting parents and teachers based upon their use of student booster club dollars. So we were able to defeat that legislation. So all of these pieces of legislation that we were able to defeat, it was good for the state of Mississippi. And I'm just really, really excited about returning in the 2021 legislative session to continue the hard work that we have started in this new term of office. Like Senator Witherspoon said, we have a really good working relationship with Lieutenant Governor Holzman. He has an open door policy, and we are able to really, truly tell him how we feel about legislation that we don't like. And we are able to have open and honest dialogue about legislation that we do like and that we think will be good for all Mississippians. And so it's a new day in the Mississippi legislature, and we want to continue the bipartisanship that has started this legislative session.
Right, which is great to see, because obviously, you've been operating under a supermajority, and so if they choose not to work with us, and that isn't what's been the best interest of the state. And I think we all could agree on that. And the bipartisanship is definitely a good thing to see, and hopefully it can continue. We're going to take a question from Facebook. It was, what has the legislature done to protect college students as they prepare to return to campuses across the state?
That is a really, really good question. We appropriated out of that $1.25 billion. We did appropriate to universities $50 million, and we also appropriated to community and junior colleges $50 million of that 1.25 billion. Now, what those are local decisions, and we are seeing that play out now. Where we had a rally at the Capitol today regarding K-12 schools and how teachers feel about the dangerous effects of students returning to school. And so what we see in the college and community college and university setting, we are seeing them figure out ways that students can learn virtually, and put those parameters in place so that learning can still take place in the fall. And I understand that that students, I mean, will be able to go back to college and community colleges, and will be able to learn virtually in the same way that we were forced, or they were forced to learn when we shut down in March for the remaining of the spring semester. So that's what we have in place, and to the extent we get more federal dollars, Senator Witherspoon and myself, along with our Senate colleagues, will be willing to do even more with the federal dollars that we receive as a state to make sure we can support our students at all levels.
Absolutely. Did you have anything to add, Senator, on that, Senator Witherspoon?
No, sir. I just definitely want to ask to those students that are listening. It's scary. It's really scary. Even as a mom dealing with what school's gonna look like. But I want her to assure what Senator Simmons said, that we made sure the money was there. That these colleges and universities need. So they can have a safe opening. For the students to return. So that is our first priority, and I definitely love that question and glad it was asked.
Yeah, absolutely. And, college students are preparing themselves to enter the workforce and getting degrees, but we want to make sure they're protected, and we want to make sure they stay in Mississippi or come back. And so how we choose to do that is going to be essential on that. We had another Facebook question. Why should a person convicted of a felony ever have lost their right to vote? How is this ever a thing? It's a great question. Either one of y'all can take it.
I'll let the attorney.
Thank you, Senator Witherspoon. It is a really great question. And in our Constitution, and we've been fighting this issue with a lot of our criminal justice coalition partners, it's a constitutional, it's in the Mississippi Constitution that 22 of felonies that are listed, you lose your right to vote. And so we have to go through this long process on a person by person, bill by bill, to restore a person's right to vote. And of course, I mean, we shouldn't have to do that. And we've had legislation that will automatically restore a person's right to vote as soon as he or she is rehabilitated. In fact, I've sponsored legislation with the support of Senator Witherspoon and other Senate Democrats that would say you automatically don't lose your right to vote if you don't go to penitentiary. So for probation-only sentences, the bill basically says that you don't lose your right to vote. So even though you may be convicted of a felony, if you get a probation-only sentence, the bill clearly outlines that you don't lose your right to vote. And the bill, on the second part of that, the bill, it says that if you are sent to our correctional facilities, then up on release, your right is automatically restored. So the same way you left your community, it should be the same way you return to your community with that fundamental right to vote. And that bill has died for the last 6-7 years, and we were not able to get any support on that bill, but some legal jurists will argue that it still remains a constitutional issue, because even though if we were able to get that bill passed through the legislature, it would only be statutory. And then the real issue is, how do we change the Constitution, which is the real place that takes a person's fundamental right to vote away? And so, great question. The two people on this Facebook Live. We do not agree with your right being taken away or anybody's right being taken away. We think that your fundamental right to vote should be separate and apart from any mistake that you've made. But it is the law constitutionally in Mississippi that we need to work on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Senator.
Oh, I just wanted to piggyback off what Senator Simmons says to the person that asked the questions. Remember that some voting rights can be restored, through your legislature. So please come see us.
Yes.
We welcome that, and a lot of individuals does not know about that. So please, you need to check to see if your voting right can be restored, and bring it to your legislator. So we can work on making that happen for you.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's another question that you might want to tackle, Senator Simmons. Someone asked about the Mississippi Back to Business Liability Assurances bill. I believe Senator Doty authored that bill in relation to, I guess, people opening back up due to COVID-19 and whatnot. He asked, what are some steps to protect workers? Were there any type of guarantees in that regard? You want to comment on that?
Yeah, this bill was opposed by Senate Democrats. I can just tell you, and really for the most part, it was opposed by House Democrats and many, if I'm not mistaken, all the members of the Black Caucus as well. It's an absolute immunity bill, and it grants immunity to businesses, organizations for roughly 3 years. I mean, it's almost like it doesn't matter how a person contracts the virus. We know as lawyers, it's a causation issue. Mm-hmm. So there wouldn't have been lawsuits from a person who contracted the virus to say, well, this is where I got the virus. So that's a causation issue. So that part of it we were not concerned about. We were concerned mainly about those nursing home settings where we argued and debated in committee and on the floor that this bill will protect those nursing homes who knew they had an outbreak and did not allow loved ones the benefit of knowing that they were experiencing an outbreak. And 2 weeks later, their loved one died. And so, they have no way to redress that under law based upon this bill. And so those nursing homes took all of your money and taking care of your loved one. They killed your loved one. And now you cannot actually address that in a court of law based upon the damages that you suffered and the loved one you lost. As far as those employees, no protection for those frontline workers who've been working since March, where we had the benefit of sheltering in place. There are a lot of frontline workers who never had a day off work, and they didn't have the luxury of staying at home. In fact, they were actually taking care of us and serving us, whether it was at the grocery store, the gas station. And we know how the majority of those frontline workers, how they look. Mm-hmm. And so it's unfortunate that they are not protected. And this back to business immunity bill basically gave more protections to their employers and did not at all protect them employees.
Absolutely. And that's one of the concerning things is when you take away folks' right and ability to seek recourse in the courts, it limits their rights. And that's a concerning thing. It's been the constant fight in the tort reform battle. And it seems as if a pandemic occurs and they use that as an opportunity to do some of the same sort of protections. It's concerning, and we appreciate y'all fighting, but it seems like we had a misguided direction in that regard of who we should be giving the protections to. As you said, Senator.
And Marcus, you are exactly right. The advantage of the pandemic was in fact used to basically pass a tort reform bill because that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wish we could get to more questions, but it's almost time for us to wrap up. So if Senator Witherspoon and Senator Simmons, if y'all give us some final thoughts just on the session and your overall thoughts in general about where we are and what's going on, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Senator Witherspoon, you know you first.
You got to unmute.
Unmute, Senator.
There you go.
Okay, I was muted.
All right.
Okay, well, as I said, 2020 was different. It was challenging, to leave the Senate and, 50 members was tested positive of the corona, upsetting and heartbreaking, and now lately I hear that, we have some legislators that's, in the hospital. But so leaving on a sad note, but, the work must go on. Mississippi is moving in a different direction, and it's a good direction. We made a big move with that flag, like as Senator Simmons says, that the everybody stepped up, the Republicans, the business owners, so they're saying we want a new Mississippi, so I look forward to 2021. I look for good legislation, bipartisan legislation. We can't stop here with the flag. We must continue to make, laws for the better of Mississippi.
Absolutely. Senator Simmons?
Well, I'm really excited about the work that we were able to achieve. Every legislative session, you'll leave and you're not happy about everything. But for the most part, I can say that we had some great successes. And for those failures that we experienced, we look forward to making them not threats to us in the 2021 session, but more so opportunities. And so we will continue to work in the same manner that we worked in 2020 regular legislative session, and to pass good policy for all Mississippians. And I cannot say this enough. The flag was just the beginning of what we need to be doing in the state of Mississippi. We actually, our healthcare system, which is overwhelmed now, would not be overwhelmed to the extent that it is overwhelmed if we would have expanded provisions of the Affordable Care Act. We're talking about 300,000 Mississippians that we have left without healthcare coverage. We would have been able to create 9,000 new jobs, and we would have generated an additional $1 billion a year for the state of Mississippi, which would have actually relieved some of the stresses that we are seeing now on our healthcare systems. We would have saved rural hospitals, some of which are closing, and that's something that we need to look forward to doing in the 2021 session. And all of those wonderful bills that Senator Witherspoon is working on and other Senate Democrats are working on, whether it's Bandit Box, pay equity, criminal justice reform bills that would continue to fully fund education so that our districts that are disproportionately affected are equipped to better serve and educate the students in those communities. Voting rights. We missed a great opportunity regarding mail-in voting. A lot of states are doing mail-in voting because of the pandemic. Senate Democrats pushed for mail-in voting, and we were not able to get that in the bill. Also, we wanted additional dollars to be spent so that we can set up satellites throughout the county where people, even in the absentee voting process, would not be required just to go to the courthouse. If we could have satellites throughout the county where the clerk had the authority to set up those satellites just to balance the health of voters with what we are dealing with and their right to vote. And we were unable to get that pushed through. And so all of those issues we need to look forward to. We are hopeful that through the bipartisan efforts that we have seen, that we'll be able to get some, if not all, of these legislative efforts for 2021. So we are excited, and we have more work to do. And thank you and One Voice for having us today.
Thank you, Senator Simmons, and thank you, Senator Witherspoon. We appreciated both of your remarks. You gave some very informative answers, and This has been a great series. This is part 2 of this Mississippi Legislative Recap. Thanks again, as Senator Simmons says, to One Voice and the Mississippi NAACP. We also need to remind folks that we've got an election in November. Right. And the way you can get policy and advocacy happening for you and for your interests is to elect people that think like you and believe in the things you believe in. So on November 3rd, folks need to make sure they go out and vote, make the right decisions. And again, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Senator Simmons. Thanks, Senator Witherspoon. And everybody have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.